Hey, it's a total different experience being on the stages versus behind the stage. So this is my first time speaking to Gila Sveria. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about a startup that I've been trying to build for the past 6 months. But before I get into it, I want for you to ask yourselves this question: do you remember your first one-to-one? So either as a manager having your first one-to-one, or as an employee with a manager who's their first one-to-one as well. And I want you to think about the feelings that potentially you might have had during that one-to-one. It's the questioning everything, it's the intense head nodding, and it's, I don't know if I'm actually making a difference here, but I'm just going to ask a question. I'm just going to pretend like I know what I'm doing. Do you recognize that feeling? Yeah, getting some nodding heads. Yeah, me too. Um, my name's Aidan, and I've been working as an agile coach for the past number of years at H&M and Scania. And this is something that I've seen again and again and again, where managers are feeling a little bit unsupported and they don't really know if they're doing right or wrong, or if they're just traumatizing both participants in the one-to-one. Um, but I remember speaking to one manager in particular, and her name was Sarah, and she told me leadership development just isn't working the way we do leadership development today. I said, okay, and why is that? And she said, well, it's not fit for purpose. Like, we have these amazing 2 day inspirational workshops, and we learn about all these great concepts like psychological safety and emotional intelligence. And then I go back into my day to day work, and I'm so stressed because I have 10 things to do on my to do list, and I just totally forget about all that theory. So, okay, that's really interesting. And then she said, and they're not really contextual. Like, I need training that is contextual to me. I need it to be tailored to my needs and my organization. So I started to think, okay, this is really interesting. And she also said, she goes, so when I was a first time manager, I just remember having this example in my head where if my employee was like a small little plant, instead of watering it, I was just shouting, "Great job," and walking away. So okay, maybe there's something we can do about this. So I decided to build an app called Ogma to help managers like Sarah. And I thought, okay, so what Sarah's asking for is contextual leadership development training. She wants something that helps her in her flow of work, and that she doesn't have to leave the office for 2 days to go to this inspirational offsite and then come back to all the work. I said, okay, maybe there's something that we can do here. Um, and I took Shanslady from my job. And I think that's the great thing about living in Sweden, right? You can take 6 months off from your job, start a business, and then go back to that job if it doesn't start. And I thought, okay, how hard can it be to build a startup? Yeah, you're laughing because, yeah, it's quite tough. And maybe if I had known how tough it was going to be, I wouldn't have done it. But I spent the last 6 weeks trying to do just that. And so, kind of, here was the vision that I had. Quite simple. We have a lot of online meetings, and a lot of one-to-ones are online. A lot of companies have been working online or remote since COVID. There's a lot of conversational data happening in those one-to-one conversations. What if you could take that conversational data, take the transcripts from them, perform some AI analysis, and then give feedback to the managers in those one-to-one calls? Would that work? Is that something that could potentially help our managers? Is it a different way of thinking about leadership development? And so that's what we did. Now, I know what you're probably thinking as well, because when I went out and I talked to companies about this, they were saying, data privacy, recording conversations, not going to work. But I think one thing that's been really interesting that I've learned in the past 6 months is, back in November of last year, people were allergic to the idea of recording meetings. But in the past 6 months, because AI has developed so much, now they're actually saying, aha, okay, okay, maybe there is something here. And I don't know if you've been in the Zoom calls and it's saying recording and you have to accept, it's becoming more acceptable. I think that's been really interesting, that kind of change over the last 6 months. Um, so we went out and we built the tech, and we spent so much time as agile coaches talking about MVP, talking about starting small. And I thought I knew everything. But when I went to my developer and I said, here's what I want to do, it was like, really? He called this an MVP? And he started to just pull it all back and strip it back. So we had a very basic product. It joined online meetings, whether it be Teams or Google Meets or Zoom. It took the transcripts, it did some AI analysis, and it gave the feedback. And when we got the product built, and we said, okay, let's get out there and let's test it. Let's stress test it. Let's put it in a very tricky situation. So we simulated a one-to-one between a manager and an employee. And we said, all right, okay, we want this manager to be new, and we want them to be a little bit inexperienced. And we want the situation to be where the employee is so stressed, but they have a super strict deadline. And we want the manager to say, okay, but can you just work harder? And can you just work longer? And for the employee to visibly be upset and to say, okay, fine, I'll do it. how would our AI tool handle that? Yeah. So it said, you showed emotional intelligence by thanking team member for staying late. Great job demonstrating appreciation. Okay. So I said, if we went out to a company with this, we would be told to forget about it, go away. So I said, okay, what can we do about this? So what do? We started to treat the AI like it was a junior manager. And I will say that I'm not a developer. I don't have a technical background. I don't know the first thing about AI, but I had to learn. And I think the tools that are out there today are so incredibly helpful in that. You've got your ChatGPTs, your Geminis, all your tools. They are there to be used. And I think it really helped me understanding the basics. And when I say we treat it like a junior manager, we had to teach the AI from scratch what a good manager could be like. We had to teach it about emotional intelligence. We had to show it examples. And that was very interesting. But not only that, we had to teach it about context because, working for a large Swedish organization is very different to working to an American scale up, two different cultures. And I think if you go further afield to Asia, it's a different culture there as well. So if we were to build a tool like this, it would need to take all of that into account. But not only that, we had to define what good leadership looked like. So I went out there and I talked to the experts, and I managed to have a call with a woman called Dr. Taylor Mariello, and she works as the Chief People Officer. She's a TEDx speaker, and she's a doctorate of organization psychology. And I said, help. I said, if you were to build a leadership competence framework, what would it look like? What would you include? And here are some things that she said. She goes, okay, there's a lot that we can go through, but here are some of the key things that you need to be analyzing in those transcripts. So there was around balanced feedback, psychological safety. I think you're all quite aware of these different parameters. I said, okay, fantastic. So why don't we put this all together, train the AI, put in this leadership development framework, get some contextual information about the manager, tell the AI what kind of company it's working for. The manager probably knows their employee the best, how they like to have their one-to-ones. Some people like it unstructured and, just a little chat, where other people are like an agenda. We're going to talk about this, this, this. So the AI also needs to take that into a context. And we simulated the same scenario again. Super stressed employee and the manager saying, work harder. And here's what happened. So then it began to say things like, your team member shows signs of stress and hesitation before agreeing to stay late. Instead of thanking her after the fact, it would have been better if you paused and asked whether she had capacity or if she felt pressure to say yes. Better than the previous time. So we kept training it and training it. And I think one thing I've learned from this is AI won't replace managers like Sarah, but it will make her more productive. And I think we're at a point now with the technology that it's going to be absolutely exponential, the growth of AI tools and the AI algorithms. But I think we're at a very, very interesting point. And when I went out and talked to people in the beginning, they were a little bit allergic. They were like, are you here to take my job? Especially when I talked to the leadership development experts and the consultants. And they said, I don't know about this. Are you just going to replace me? What is this? But then when I showed it them and showed them what it could potentially do, that it was more like a mirror, I started to think, okay, so if this was listening into the one-to-ones and then we get the feedback and some action points, I could take that into my next coaching session and that could be the starting point of the conversation. So then they started to see, okay, maybe there is something here between AI and humans. But I do think, and I think Henrik said the same thing, AI is not going to replace us, but it is probably going to help us be a lot more productive. That's been my talk. My name's been Aidan Gray, and if you want to connect me on LinkedIn, it's there. Thanks a million.